Have you ever stood in a room full of people and felt completely invisible? Not because you were quiet or because no one noticed you, but because someone said something that cut deep. A subtle jab, a joke at your expense. Laughter erupts, but not from you. You smile politely, maybe chuckle along, pretending it didn't sting. But deep down, something aches. Maybe you've been interrupted mid-sentence, your thoughts dismissed like background noise. Maybe you've felt the shift in a conversation when your presence becomes an afterthought, and you wonder, why does this keep happening to me? The easy answer is to blame others. They're rude, they're arrogant, they don't know better. But what if the real problem isn't about them at all? What if the way people treat you is in part a reflection of the way you show up in the world? Carl Jung once said, "The world will ask you who you are, and if you don't know, the world will tell you." The world will tell you, and often it tells you something cruel. Because people instinctively react to what you project, your energy, your confidence, your boundaries, or lack thereof. Respect isn't something you ask for. It's not something you plead for. It's something you command, quietly, consistently, without even speaking. But here's the hard truth. If you don't respect yourself deeply, the world won't either. This isn't about being aggressive or pretending to be someone you're not. It's about reclaiming your presence. It's about learning to carry yourself in a way that says, "I matter," without having to say a word. And yet so many of us live like ghosts in our own lives, overexposed, over-accommodating, overly polite, afraid to upset the balance, afraid to lose people, afraid to be disliked. But in trying to be liked, we are often disrespected. So the question is no longer, why don't they respect me? The real question is, what am I allowing that tells them they don't have to? It happened during a team meeting on a Wednesday morning, just another roundtable update, the kind where everyone politely shares what they're working on while sipping lukewarm coffee and pretending to care. Jacob, a soft-spoken analyst, had been quietly preparing his presentation for days. It wasn't anything earth-shattering, but it was thorough, well-researched, and his moment to finally speak with some authority. When his turn came, he cleared his throat, opened his slide deck, and began explaining a pattern he'd noticed in the latest client feedback. About 2 minutes in, someone snorted. "Didn't Sarah already say that last week?" One of the louder team members interrupted, eyes darting around the room for support. A few others chuckled, more at the joke than the comment itself. Jacob froze. His heart thudded in his chest. He gave a half smile and muttered something about elaborating on a different point. But the moment was lost. The room had moved on. Afterward, no one mentioned it. No apologies, no acknowledgement, just a casual dismissal of something he'd worked hard on. Jacob returned to his desk feeling small, almost ridiculous for having taken it so seriously. But he did take it seriously, and it wasn't the first time. It reminded him of something else, a dinner with friends months earlier. He had told a story, nothing particularly personal, but one friend twisted it into a running joke. They all laughed again and again, exaggerating and reshaping his words into something absurd. And while they said it was just for fun, every laugh chipped away at his sense of belonging. These moments accumulate. They seem small on the surface, but their weight compounds over time. It's not that Jacob was weak. He was capable, intelligent, even thoughtful in ways most people weren't. But something about how he carried himself told the world, "You can interrupt me. You can laugh at me. I won't stop you." And so they did. Later that night, Jacob sat in silence, replaying the moment in the meeting over and over again, not out of vanity, but out of confusion. What did I do wrong? That was the real question haunting him, because part of him knew, deep down, that he had permitted it. Not consciously, not willingly, but subtly, through posture, tone, silence, and self-doubt. He never challenged the interruption, never met anyone's eyes, never asked for the room back. He simply vanished mid-sentence and let the moment define him. It's moments like these that fracture us, not because of what others say or do, but because of what we don't do in response. Carl Jung warned that what you fail to confront in yourself, you will meet as fate. And perhaps Jacob's fate wasn't written by anyone else. It was shaped by his silence. Have you ever been there, not just the target of a joke, or the one overlooked, but the person who questions, later in the quiet, whether your own energy invited the disrespect? This isn't about blaming yourself for others' bad behavior. It's about asking a deeper question. What part of me allowed this to happen? And what would it take to never let it happen again? The uncomfortable truth is this: you cannot demand respect from others if you do not first radiate it from within yourself. Respect in its truest form is not a performance, it is a presence. And presence begins with self-respect. Carl Jung once wrote, "You are what you do, not what you say you'll do." It's a deceptively simple idea, but devastatingly accurate. Most people believe respect comes from words, image, or intentions. But the world doesn't respond to your promises. It responds to your patterns. If you constantly accommodate, constantly downplay your own ideas, constantly smile through discomfort to maintain peace, you are not showing strength. You are showing fear. And fear, whether you realize it or not, is a signal. It tells the people around you exactly how far they can push you without resistance. This brings us to one of Jung's most powerful concepts, the persona. The persona is the mask we wear to function in society. It's the role we've learned to play: the agreeable employee, the supportive friend, the nice guy, the woman who never causes waves. We build this mask to be accepted, to fit in, to avoid being seen as difficult or different. But like all masks, it has a price. The more we perfect our persona, the more disconnected we become from our authentic selves. The deeper the mask, the more hollow the presence. Here's where it becomes dangerous. When the mask is all that people see, they begin to relate only to that mask. And since the mask is designed to appease, to adjust, to avoid confrontation, they learn they can treat you accordingly. Not necessarily out of cruelty, but out of conditioning. You've trained them, unintentionally. You've trained them that you'll stay silent when interrupted, that you'll laugh along when mocked, that you'll stay in places and relationships where your value is ignored, simply because confrontation feels too heavy. Jung warned us that the persona, if not examined, becomes a prison. And in that prison, you may look like a perfectly adjusted adult, successful, polite, dependable. But you'll feel something different inside, small, anxious, unseen. Because the truth is, respect cannot reach a person who is hiding, and hiding doesn't always look like shyness. It looks like excessive politeness. It looks like self-erasure. It looks like going along just to get along. It looks like saying it's okay when it clearly isn't. If you've ever left a room wondering why no one took you seriously, ask yourself, did I respect myself in that moment? Did I protect my boundary, or did I perform my persona? Self-respect doesn't roar. It doesn't need to dominate. It simply stands. It holds. It occupies space unapologetically. And the paradox is this: when you stop trying so hard to be liked, people begin to notice you. When you stop speaking just to be heard, people start to listen. When you remove the mask and speak from your center, even in silence, you begin to command something far more powerful than attention. You begin to command respect. So, how do you begin to shift this dynamic? How do you go from being overlooked to being unshakably seen? It doesn't require yelling or dominating. It requires subtle, intentional shifts in behavior. Small actions that quietly command attention and reshape how people perceive you. Respect isn't demanded, it's evoked. And what evokes it is not power in the loud sense, but power in the anchored sense, the kind that doesn't flinch, doesn't chase, and doesn't need approval to feel real. What follows are 5 practical techniques, grounded in timeless philosophy, that will help you command respect without ever raising your voice. 1. Stand up and look them in the eye. A ritual of presence and power. It sounds simple, too simple, but when someone enters a room and you remain seated, you send an unconscious message: I yield. You may not mean to, you may not feel inferior, but the body speaks louder than the mind. Standing up isn't just about being polite. It's a ritual of presence. When you rise to greet someone, shoulders back, chin level, and eyes meeting theirs, you assert that your space, your presence, your being matters. Machiavelli, in The Prince, emphasized that power is not just held, it is performed. The performance of power begins before a single word is spoken. Looking someone directly in the eye, especially during greetings, initiates an ancient psychological signal: I see you, and I am not beneath you. This isn't aggression, this is symmetry. When you make eye contact from a standing posture, you level the energetic playing field. People remember those who carry themselves like they matter, because the moment you do, others begin to agree. The silent stare, reclaiming space when interrupted. You're mid-sentence. Someone cuts in. You feel the burn of embarrassment or irritation, and then you do what you've always done. You shrink. You nod. You let it go. But what if you didn't? What if you simply paused, turned your head slowly, and looked directly at the interrupter, calm, composed, unblinking? Nietzsche once said, "The most powerful man is he who remains silent while others tremble." The stare is not a weapon of retaliation, a mirror. When used with composure, it reflects back the social error without confrontation. It says, "I noticed what you did, and I won't let it slide." After a beat, a simple phrase like, "Can I finish what I was saying?" becomes a declaration, not of dominance, but of personal sovereignty. The power here lies in restraint, not in matching volume, not in confrontation, just presence. Those who constantly interrupt others often do so to assert control. When you remain still, when you stare without flinching, you do not yield that control, you reclaim it. 3. Ask them to repeat the joke, turning the spotlight around. When someone makes a joke at your expense, especially in a group, the moment can feel like quicksand. The laughter spreads, and you become the object, not the subject. Your instinct may be to laugh along or pretend you didn't hear. But here's a move that flips the script entirely. Ask them to repeat it, say it calmly, even with a neutral smile. "Sorry, I didn't catch that, could you say it again?" It's not about pretending to misunderstand. It's about turning the light onto them. In the act of repetition, the joke often loses its sting. The audience has already heard it. The timing is gone, and more importantly, the person who made it is now forced to own it a second time, consciously. This technique shifts you from passive receiver to active observer. You hold the frame, you control the tempo, and you put subtle social pressure where it belongs, on the one who crossed a line. Jung said, "Shame is a soul-eating emotion." But sometimes, a little earned discomfort is the very lesson that prevents future disrespect. 4. Break the frame with a non-sequitur. Psychological disruption as control. There are moments when someone is clearly trying to provoke you. Maybe it's a passive-aggressive jab. Maybe it's an attempt to push your buttons, to make you reactive, to make you lose your footing. This is where one of the most elegant psychological techniques comes into play: the non-sequitur. Instead of defending yourself or retaliating, say something completely unrelated with calm conviction. "Do you know any good jazz bars around here?" Or, "I think I left the oven on this morning." Or even, "Is it just me, or does this room feel colder than usual?" At first glance, it seems absurd, but it works because it breaks the flow. Provocation relies on emotional rhythm, a jab, a reaction, an escalation. But when you drop a question from another universe into the room, you short-circuit the rhythm. You confuse the predator, and in that confusion, you assert control, not by overpowering the situation, but by reframing it entirely. This is strategic disengagement. It's the art of taking the wheel back without anyone realizing you were even off the road. 5. Walk away when necessary. Choosing absence over humiliation. There will be times when none of the above works, when a person, a group, or an environment has already decided that you do not deserve respect. Not because of anything you've done, but because some people are addicted to hierarchy, and in their hierarchy, they need someone to sit at the bottom so they can feel tall. In those moments, you must remember one of the most sacred acts of power: the decision to walk away. Walking away is not surrender, it is a refusal. It is a signal that says, I will not trade my dignity for your acceptance. Alan Watts once said, trying to define yourself is like trying to bite your own teeth. Some people will never see you clearly. They don't have the emotional depth or the psychological clarity. And the more you try to prove your worth to them, the more invisible you become. But when you leave, quietly, deliberately, completely, you stop being the background of their chaos. You become the absence that demands reflection. Respect isn't always earned through confrontation. Sometimes it's earned through withdrawal. The moment you decide that your peace is worth more than their approval, you step out of the game entirely. And that's when everything shifts, because while presence invites attention, absence commands reverence. Each of these 5 techniques is deceptively simple, but beneath the surface, they speak a language older than words, the language of presence, power, and self-respect. You don't have to shout. You don't have to prove. You don't have to explain. You simply have to show up with your energy anchored and your worth unshaken. And in doing so, you teach the world exactly how to treat you. Respect does not come from fear. It comes from presence. And true presence only arises when you are honest with yourself. Not the version of yourself that performs, pleases, or blends in, but the version that stands quietly, confidently, and unapologetically in your own truth. You don't have to prove your worth to anyone. Not through over-explanations, not through endless forgiveness, not by tolerating behavior that drains you. The people who are meant to respect you will feel it, not because you demand it, but because you embody it. And the people who refuse to give it, they were never your mirror to begin with. Carl Jung once said, I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become. So choose wisely, because every time someone tests your value, interrupts you, mocks you, overlooks you, you are presented with a choice. Not the choice to fight or flee, but the choice to remember. You don't have to react to everything. You don't have to stay where you're not seen. You don't have to shrink to be safe. You have another option, a quiet one, a grounded one. You can pause, you can observe, you can walk away, and none of those choices make you weak. On the contrary, they are the very signs of inner strength, because when you no longer depend on others to define your value, you become unshakable. You begin to speak less, but say more. You begin to do less, but mean more. You begin to show up not as a shapeshifter, but as something rare in today's world. A person who knows who they are and doesn't need the world's permission to exist fully. So the next time someone underestimates you, interrupts you, tests you, remember this: your response is not about them. It's about the message you send to yourself. It's about reinforcing that inner voice that says, I don't need to win this moment. I only need to be true in it. Because the truth is, you were never invisible. You were simply taught to dim your light so others could shine. But that chapter ends now. This is where you stop blending in. This is where you stop shrinking. This is where you reclaim the silent, undeniable authority that has always been yours. So take a breath, lift your head, step forward, and let the world feel your presence. Not because you demand respect, but because you finally give it to yourself. End quote. If this message spoke to something deep inside you, don't keep it to yourself. Hit the like button to let the algorithm know this kind of content matters. And if you want more videos that don't just inform, but awaken you, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss what's coming next. We're building a space for inner truth, transformation, and real strength. Now I want to hear from you. What part of this video resonated with you the most? Which insight or technique will you apply in your own life starting today? Drop a comment below. I read every one. Let's grow together.